Welcome to week 5 of our course. During this week, we should be working collaboratively on our groups, making sure you're communicating effectively with your group members. We'll talk about the individual sections as we get into the week's presentation, and we'll go over some of our expectations of the week and what those might look like. So let's go ahead and move forward. We had a stop on the broadcast post, but I'm going to continue to go forward, and we're going to look at a portion of our screen. So looking at the course dates, again, this is week 5 of our course, which starts Monday through the 22nd. We do have a break next week, so there's nothing due. I have opened up or readied the system to open up week 6 and 7. So if you wanted to look at those assignments and look maybe at getting ahead of some things, those will be available for you next week for you to do also. But it's also good in kind of your time and process and thought is to take a break and get away from some of the stuff. Most of us are educators in schools, and we also have some of that time off. So don't forget your family and be a part of their lives also, and take a little step away from some of the schoolwork will help to refresh you and get ready to move on as you have a lot of work to complete during the next couple weeks in your courses here and as we move forward. But looking really closely at week 5, we're going to look at some of the content standards for the California Common Core. And when you think about our content standards for Common Core, really they've come out in the last 3 years and get a pretty good definition of what we're expecting in our English language arts and our mathematics. The NGSS standards for science are out and being developed probably through most of your districts. Hopefully you're working on those pieces if you have something to do with science, and look at some of the spiral patterns and the way that those are accessed. They're a little bit different than, or I say a lot of bit different than what has typically been presented. But we've all seen that in the ELA and in the math standards also. We're going to look at some of the terminologies defined within curriculum design and assessment and what really does that mean. And then kind of look at the theories that are out there for how students learn best and approaches that the pedagogy that we instruct and how we provide an assessment and what those do in relation to the standards. If you're in the curriculum development area in your current work, you kind of get this feeling, but backwards design is one of those things that you always look at in curriculum design methodologies, that you look at where you want to go and what the expectation when you complete this course is, and design backwards to make sure that you're planning your instruction most appropriately. It's one of the most effective ways to ensure that you're getting to the points that you want to get to. And remember, with the standards now, instead of having to rush through some content pieces, is really looking for depth and making sure you're getting that depth of knowledge, the DOKs, involved in your curriculum so that students are allowed to experiment and kind of develop thought processes as they move along. And then so when we look at that, we're going to ask you to kind of develop and communicate along those same lines during this week. We have some reading during this week, chapters 4, 5, and 6 from Pink's 2011. Look at that and it kind of relates to the curriculum design and where they talk about standards and where standards are aligning to within the curriculum development. And there's some video pieces for you to kind of take a look at. There's an article first, the role of an educator in the future. And you might see this changes. Like I probably said in the past, I work as an administrator of a virtual school. And a lot of my conversations revolve around the personalized nature of instruction and providing personalized services to students because the technology can afford that piece and products. So kind of take a look at how this article relates to that changes in the educational environment, what would happen with you bringing technology in, not for technology's sake, but really to support the student and what that student can do to support their learning and comprehension. And so that changes the curriculum design aspect of a lot of courses and the way that we're using things. Big thinkers. Take a look at the video here, becoming competitive. And when you get the being competitive piece as a learner, there's some different aspects or different steps that you might want to take. Ruma Penetreras is a researcher who really looked at the way that we implement and use technology within a classroom environment for instruction and for learning. And you see the Samar model, and that's something you want to look up as you move along in educational technology. And that really, with the technology, when you're really using technology to most effective point, you're redefining the way that instruction actually occurs, rather than just supplanting the technology, the typing instead of a pencil. And that's using technology, which we would use on a normal basis on a normal day. But is that really redefining the way that learning is occurring in your classroom? So those are some things to think about when you think about that piece. And there's one more video to look at that piece. I kind of talked about and alluded to during this week is this is kind of the midpoint of the course. It's time to kind of take a break. Anxieties kind of tend to build up because your grades are kind of at that point where you get a really good sense of where you're kind of lying out in the course. A lot of us are doing very well, and we'll be finished with last week's grading probably about Thursday. So you kind of put things up and let God kind of guide you. And if you part of that is to relax, breathe, and maybe take some time away from the class, spend it with family, rejuvenate yourself, and be ready to kind of push through as we go into December. Discussion board is something we need to kind of take a look at this week because it kind of changes it a little bit for what we want to see is in the discussion board piece. Mainly around this assignment here. When you're working as your collaborative group, we're going to put multiple aspects of technologies into a presentation, but we want to have our group post their presentation to the discussion board so that our group, our cohort as a team, can go provide feedback to the groups themselves. And that should be done by the end of week 6. So that's one thing after you do the submissions for me that I can review. We're also going to submit those for review of the other students in the class. So kind of take a look at that also. That assignment is due this Sunday at 12 midnight should be in, and I put that date on here as soon as we're done with the presentation here. But that is our typical. So our project really looks at being a collaborative group project. Some things that you could do in curriculum development and design with your students is make them and have them work in a collaborative group. If they're not in education, sometimes in education we work collaboratively, sometimes we don't. But in business or anything else, the nature of that is collaborative nature, sharing ideas, moving forward, creating a plan, and kind of developing that plan to fruition. And that's what we're looking at as far as our week 5 assignment. Kind of the outcomes, the things we want to make sure that you are getting from this is that we're able to dialogue on a discussion board, let our groups and other people give feedback back, and that's something you could do within a course environment also, is post something for students to give feedback to one another. As all of us probably know, that teaching a subject or a content is a way that you really refine and define your knowledge around that area. And so giving students the permission to go through and critique, evaluate, and give good feedback. And good feedback is, this is why it's this way, and this is why I think this is the way it should be or shouldn't be. With data is a great feedback tool. And so I'll be looking for those pieces also. So based on our dialogue on the Common Core State Standards, and develop the in-services that correspond with multimedia presentations to use with the staff. So your presentation should include a motivating, fully engaging PowerPoint, Prezi, Google Slides, podcast, or some other type of multimedia application. And multimedia means different types of media included into your presentation. Every time I suggest a certain media, it seems like that's all I get back, and that's not necessarily what I'm looking for. Look at your strengths in this piece. Where are your strengths in technology? Where do your strengths lie? If your strengths lie within PowerPoint or Google Slides or something like that, you work on that piece. If you have another person in your group that really wants to look at, including pieces of video into your presentation, that's another PowerPoint piece. If you want to look at some things like Powtoons, and you're going to create some animation in relation to your presentation that's going to be embedded into a slide or two, that's another multimedia tool that you could use. That doesn't mean that everybody needs to use video and that everybody needs to use PowerTunes. It's just look and adapt to where your strengths are. Make sure you're communicating those with your team, and so that people are utilizing their strengths and the benefit of all to move forward. The outcome of the presentation is to help your staff understand the changes from the California State curriculum standards and how it impact them on the future development of instruction and assessment. Below are guidelines, that we want to make sure that you're hitting these elements as you move through, because they're along with the guidelines of the rubric. Title page or title slide that you're presenting yourself. And on your title slide, something I would ask too is that you have all your group members on that title slide. So I know if you're submitting it by one group, that I know I'm giving credit to all of the group members. An introduction, real kind of some, here we are. I would put this in kin to developing a abstract that kind of goes from soup to nuts and a abridged version about what's going to be going on or what's going to be presented. And then your key points, okay, 2 to 3 slides, significant portion of your presentation itself. All members should have some content expertise in these slides and really be a part of the development of the presentation itself. Really, I don't need an individual, Johnny did this slide and Ted did this slide. I don't need that. I assume that everybody's working collaboratively. We're working on our strengths. We distributed work based on those strengths that we found, and then went and moved forward to make sure and assure that it was what we wanted to present out to the rest of the staff members and the rest of the school members that were with our cohort right now. This activity kind of outline. So in the guise and the mindset that you were going to go sit down and present this information to some members of your current staff, and how they might receive that information is a kind of your audience piece. And so you want to look at those catchy pieces that you might want to say, okay, here's some things that are really cool. Here's some things that aren't really cool, and how might they use it. Some good elements to include into a presentation like this is sometimes maybe if you're 6th through 12th, it's content related. If you are K through 6 and it's grade level related, some of those aspects really kind of support the linking in and grabbing someone's attention because it relates to them. And that's one thing that you could do to kind of make that part of your PowerPoint presentation. And the conclusion is just a wrap up, maybe just an expectation of things that they should have received, or very, real clear of, they're more like points. You did this, 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 this. If you have any citations or an APA format, the mechanics and the conventions of it. I will tell you, in most presentations that I do in public, I don't put a lot of super animations built into the communication itself. I kind of work to make it look seamless, make it look clean, and make it good to present. Things burning on fire and stuff like that are great maybe when you do something with your kid for just a grabbing attention, but they're not great on every slide. Things dancing across the screen sometimes are distracting to the learner, especially a lot of adult learners. And so kind of remember that as you go through the mechanics and the connections and things like that as you develop your presentation. We're going to head back to our Blackboard piece. Like I said, we're going to change the date on here, make sure that you have the 22nd. It's 11:59 would be when it's due. Okay, and so that is essentially, I'm going to turn back over to our face cam here. And there I'm back. So hopefully you take those pointers. Some things at this point, you're just cleaning up some of the pieces based on some things I said. And that will really help you to do better in your outcome. Again, I'm always willing, if you turn something in by Friday, trying to give you back some feedback. Better ways to do that as far as that feedback piece. Remember, text me at any time. I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible with that. It's usually the fastest way to make connection. Send me an email and say, here's the presentation. Would you kind of look at it? Because that's the easier way. If you submit it into the system holds it as it's the assignment itself, and sometimes it's a little difficult to pull it out of there. The other ways are a little bit quicker to get back some feedback to you that might be more important for your final submission. Have a blessed week, and good luck to all of you, and have a merry and happy Thanksgiving.